What's going on? It's Dapper Don, and I'm excited to welcome you all back. So, recently, a friend of mine asked me how I was able to talk to people the way that I do. For those of you who've never seen me in person, I tend to have a very extroverted way of interacting with people, and the way I talk tends to pull people in when I have long conversations. At least that's what I've been told. Still, I never really thought about how I did it. Wasn't something I could put into words until today, because I needed an episode this week. So, for today, I'm going to do a mostly unscripted, just genuine conversation with some research and a story or two to back it up. As such, the formatting for this episode is just a little bit different than normal. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, when talking about my own struggles when it comes to caring what people thought and how constricting that is, it was. I first need to talk about what was always generally assumed of me because of the way I voluntarily presented myself. For one, it was always assumed that I was going to be the funniest, the most entertaining, the most engaging, the leader, the warner, the rock. You got a problem, you bring it to Don, and he'll solve it while also giving you a good joke or two. You causing problems, Don's gonna be the one getting in your ass. And, I always, these expectations that that I created, at first, they were fine. I felt like I was doing something by being the one that was the entertainer, the rock, the one that people leaned on. But then they sort of started to become crippling, and I started to feel boxed in when that was all that people were expecting of me. I mean, I've been in many romantic relationships where I was kind of boxed in as far as my personality goes. If it wasn't funny, entertaining, or even remotely interesting to the person I was in a relationship with, I was all but completely rejected. And I was treated as an annoyance, as a pest. And, you know, partly I blame myself for forming that expectation, but it's also because of the fact that I had formed that expectation of myself through what other people thought of me that I was attracting those people in the first place. And that's not even considering the fact that I used to hold leadership positions at certain programs. And with leadership positions, there's a lot of expectations of you. You got your higher ups expecting you to represent the organization in a certain way, and then you've got the people that you're leading who expect you to always conduct yourself in a certain way. Doesn't matter if you have other interests or other things going on. You're the leader. You're the the backbone. And I know some people may not have even actually experienced it like that. Some people may just, it may just be that you have a bit of social anxiety, right? It may be that when you're out for long periods of time and you see the looks people give you, you don't know how to feel about that. It makes you feel some kind of uncomfortable, makes your skin crawl a little bit. I'm guilty of having that myself happen. And then, of course, that's not even mentioning family expectations. Family who expects you to be like this. I was once told by a family member that if I wasn't happy, to at least pretend to be happy. This is the type of thing we were dealing with, where I had to be at the top of my game, top of the morning, always on my mojo, all the time, or risk punishment, risk being ostracized, rejected. And that led to me caring about what everybody else thought about me, whether they knew me or not. And that's a heavy burden to carry. I'm telling you right now. And then again, I would attract friends and people who would expect me to be this rock, this shoulder to lean on, somebody to always be the one to get at somebody. I've been in many situations where where the person has purposely caused problems and I've had to quote get at them in order for them to just stop doing what they were doing. And I was the one having to do it. Nobody else would speak up. Nobody else would say anything. I was the one having to do it. I was the one having to go in and be that voice of reason, that voice of rationality, and that voice of rage on behalf of these other grown ass people. And that, combined with general social anxiety, combined with the leadership positions I held, combined with my family upbringing, combined with everything, made me into a nervous wreck. But it was as I was coming into this journey here at my school, at college, that I sort of realized something interesting about myself. Because you see, starting off in college, you're not going to be in everybody's faces all the time. I'm going to let you know that right now. You're not going to have the most friends. You're not going to start off and just have the most engaging best of times. You may not start off with anyone on your path at all. It's usually that you meet them along the way after you've been in it for a while. You've got 4 years, you've got time, it's no big deal. But my journey coming into college was a very isolated one because you see, I had to again separate from a group of friends of mine, um, former friends that I had. I've since reconnected with those friends, by the way, because we kind of talked it out and I've set boundaries and things of that nature. But I had to separate from them from last year going into this year going into college. And that was a completely isolated time in my life where I had no one to lean on, no one to call. And there was nothing but me, my job, and my goals to keep me afloat. There were no girlfriends, there were no relationships, there was nothing. It was just this void, this bubble that I was in, and it felt like I wouldn't be able to get out. And even starting off on campus, it just felt like I couldn't break the ice. I'm seeing all these people walk around and laugh and joke and have their groups and friends, and me, the most I'd gotten was awkward stares and people regarding me with, a long handled spoon, like how normally people do, where it's like, hey, how are you? I'm never going to see you again. So, I don't know. But that kind of bugged me. And then the fact that, I had this big dorm room and that was about it. I wasn't talking to anybody. There was no one. I was just existing in this space. And, you know, this was also a holdover from when I went to another university before I transferred to this one, where that university was a little bit less diverse. And because of that, somebody like me, who has all these nerdy hobbies and interests and such a unique personality and who's black, did not fit in well. So a lot of my time spent isolated there because, you know, a big black man with eccentric personality is a threat, says Star Witness. Um, so I spent a lot of time alone there. And again, these are things. This is something that bothered me at first. It really got to me. Like, why am I the one alone? Right? All the time that I invested into trying to be perfect, trying to be what people wanted me to be, and I have nothing to show for it. I tried to be everyone's everything at all times, and I had nothing to show for it. I had no friend. I had no one I could call for help. I had no one that I could call to just talk to. I had no one. I didn't have a girl. I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything. And it was while I was sitting in this dorm that I sort of started to develop a resentment for everything. And this is not something that they tell you happens after you've been meeting everybody's expectations for so long. It's like it's only people who have had to meet those expectations for long enough that'll tell you that resentment does follow. Resentment of everyone, resentment of family, resentment of friends, resentment of the leadership positions you took up and the expectations that the people hoisted onto you, resentment of past relationships, past partners. It was a resentment of everything. And then I ultimately had to come to the realization that it was my fault. It was my fault. Why? Because when I had the chance to assert myself and be a certain way, be the way that I wanted to be, I chose instead to be the way I thought that they wanted me to be. And I know I'm not, this is just, so this is me taking control of that, right? The first thing you have to do when freeing yourself from what other people think is you have to take control of yourself. So that's why I'm taking control of this. It it technically, quote, isn't my fault. Just like if anybody else was going through it, I wouldn't say it's their fault, but I would say that it helps to start taking ownership. You can control who you are, you can control the flow of your personality, and deep down, every single person knows who they are. It's just uncovering that knowledge, and it first starts with taking ownership. So when I realized that it was my fault that I was kind of going through all this stuff and that I was the one trying to be overly accommodating and chasing everyone and trying to be perfect for everyone, it was then that the mask, the facade that I'd kept up for so long started to shatter. And for whatever reason, I just stopped caring. I stopped caring about trying to impress people. I stopped caring about trying to appeal to people because at the end of the day, I know who I am. And the years that I spent trying to deny myself, to turn myself away, to acting like there's something wrong with me for being the way that I truly, really, authentically am, that that wasn't good. And I needed to take ownership of it and I needed to change it. So I stopped trying to impress people. I stopped trying to appear a certain way that I wasn't. Yes, I do still appear extroverted and entertaining and funny. That's because those are genuine aspects of my personality that I've had to play up. See, a lot of times when you mask, these aren't separate personality traits. They're traits that you've always had, but you have to play them up for the sake of other people. So, you know, it's like, and that, again, that's a boon to you, right? It's like, I'm always going to be funny. I'm always going to be kind, sweet, entertaining, extroverted, whatever, charismatic, whatever. But this time, I'm going to put a little bit more of me behind it, meaning that if I don't feel like doing that, I'm not going to do it. So, it starts with taking that ownership. But, there's also a lot of research behind it. And I have been doing research. I found a couple articles here that can kind of go into some light, shed some light about this. So, this is an article from Upworthy. In their health section, neuroscientist shares the trick to stop worrying about what other people think of you. Imagine how freeing it'd be to stop caring what other people think, by Todd Perry, posted on January 13th, 2025. Everyone cares what others think about them because it's part of our nature. We want to be loved and accepted by our social pack or tribe because it's essential to survival. This is evolutionary. Historically, those excluded from their tribes have faced having to live on their own and lost access to valuable resources. In some ways, as humans, social excursion is tantamount to death. However, caring too much about other people's thoughts can also become a huge problem. Obsession with other people's opinions can lead to actions that contradict our core beliefs. It can also lead to low self esteem and prevent people from doing what they like because they fear being judged. This can be incredibly challenging in today's world when we have to deal with other people's opinions online, whether it's a comment on an Instagram post or scrolling through Facebook and reading someone's views on politics or pop culture. We are constantly faced with other people's opinions. Oh, and by the way, speaking on social media, yeah, posting that you don't care what your haters think and making a whole video dedicated to your haters is not caring what people think. That's caring what people think a lot. The fact that you now have to put effort into an edited video to address a group of people that dislike you means that you care immensely what they think. Otherwise, you wouldn't put in the effort. So, if any of you are on social media and you do those types of videos, stop it. That's one of the biggest ways to free yourself is stop it. You get hate comments, ignore them. Somebody calls you a piece of shit, somebody calls you cringy, somebody calls you, ignore it. That's one of the biggest ways to free. You want to respond. You want to engage. Oh, I know you do. And maybe you can when you've calmed down a little bit. But going to immediately make the video shows that you care immensely what you think. And plus, it's just now that's cringy to fucking see. It's like just leave it alone, or just kind of, or I don't know, respond to the comment. if you really care about it, I don't know, but don't go pretending to be. The pretense on social media is something else. That's another video for another time. Anyways, back to the article. How do we stop caring about what other people think? How do we step back and develop a healthier relationship with other people's opinions? Daniel Glazer, a renowned neuroscientist, says we can start by changing the stories we tell ourselves. I have this person in my head called the critic or the editor, and at my worst, I'm incredibly good at conjuring up the person who would be most critical of my performance, he told Vogue. As a species, we've evolved to tell stories about ourselves to create narratives. We make things real, and then those things change how we act. For example, if you've had interactions with people where they were awkward or they were stilted towards you or they tried to pull away from you, the narrative you might start to tell yourself, and it's something I've even found myself telling myself, is that you're weird, that you're clingy, that you're obsessive, that you're like one of those weirdos you find on Reddit, right? You'll start telling yourself all kinds of things, especially in the romantic sense, when you're pursuing somebody romantically and they reject you. You'll start telling yourself all kinds of stories and applying their opinions to your self worth. Glazer says that to stop worrying about other people's opinions, we need to imagine someone being very pleased and positive with ourselves. The trick isn't to not care what others think, but to care about the right people, he says. It's like when you tell yourself not to think of an elephant. That's all you can think of. Instead, think about someone being pleased with your Instagram post before you put it up, or think about someone loving your art before you show it to people. If you're trying to plan projects, imagine a specific person saying a really cool thing. So the trick isn't to stop yourself thinking of other people, but to vividly conjure up someone who's delighted with what you've done, Glazer continues. So yeah, this is why I say taking ownership of it is important. You have to acknowledge that, yes, I do care what other people think. I care immensely. But if I take my mind and reframe it to, I'm going to assume that whatever, I'm going to trust myself and assume that whatever I put out, whatever I say, whatever I do, people are going to like, it makes it to where even if they don't like it, you have this shield of positivity on you. But the article goes on, How to Stop Caring About Other People's Opinions. Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, is a bit of an expert on not caring what other people think, and he has a different way of seeing things than Glazer. He believes that if we care too much about what other people think, we need to start elevating our game and doing things that are so important that other people's opinions don't matter. This is something too. When you have something truly important in your life, something you're willing to be ridiculed for, that's when you'll stop caring about others' opinions. Ironically, that's also when people start respecting you, Manson wrote on his blog. Imagine a burning building with a baby trapped inside. Okay. If you were the only one who could save the baby, you wouldn't care what others thought. You'd run into that fire without hesitation. That's an extreme example, but the principle applies to everyday life. Manson suggests asking yourself, what's so important in your life that you're willing to be ridiculed for it? If you've been wondering how to stop caring what other people think, you've already taken an important first step in confronting the issue. But understanding that there is a reason why you care what others think, the key is to find a balance where those opinions won't stop you from being yourself and doing what you love. So yes, again, taking that ownership and saying, I acknowledge that I do care too much about what other people think, and reframing it, right? Like if you have hobbies or interests, start making those hobbies and interests so important that you're willing to be ridiculed for it. Start making your personality into an art form. Make your personality something that's make being yourself something that is so important to you that you're willing to be ridiculed for it. You're willing to take the hate. You're willing to take people looking at you funny because it doesn't matter. If any of you have ever been in a relationship, one of the big things that happens in a honeymoon phase is that the two of you become so important to each other that the environment around you stops mattering. That's why PDA is such a huge thing. That's why couples doing Google eyes and talking real loud sexual talk to each other is a thing. Because you're so into each other, you become so important to each other that other people become like background noise. They're no longer the forefront of the focus. They're no longer the forefront. They're in the background. They're NPCs. You're the player. This is the type of principle that you should apply to everything about yourself. You are important enough to where you don't need to worry about other people, what other people think. And I know that's hard to just kind of come to, but it's important to take ownership and realize that it is a revelation that you can come to given time. Now, let us move on to the second article. This one is by The Telegraph. I stopped caring about what other people think, and you can too. Finally accepting that I can't control what other people think and do has allowed me to process my own feelings and live more authentically. By Georgina Fuller. Oh, Georgina. February 25th, 2025 at 10 a.m. So this was yesterday at the time of recording. Oh boy, it's going to make me make an account. I did not foresee this. And this is going to be a good article too. Yep, I'm not making an account. Fuck you. Third article is for USA Today by Charles Trepanney. What is compassion fatigue? Experts say that taking care of others can hurt your mental health. Published 7:01 a.m. August 11th, 2024. Can caring too much hurt your mental health? It's called compassion fatigue, and mental health experts say it's a phenomenon that occurs most commonly in people who work in professions like caretaking or who spend most of their time physically or emotionally taking care of another person. Though compassion and empathy are wonderful qualities to have, they can also cause burnout, anxiety, and depression if someone isn't showing the same kindness to themselves that they show other people. Caring what other people think is what I like to describe as being overly considerate of other people. You're trying not to take up too much space. You're trying not to be too much. You're trying not to be too in people's faces. It's being overly considerate. But there's also someone who also needs to be considered who would be just as, if not more important, than the opinions of random strangers who don't pay your bills and who are not nor ever will take care of you. That's numero uno. You got to look out for numero uno. You got to look out for numero uno. If you do not, you will fatigue yourself worrying about what this one thinks, worrying about what that one thinks. Oh, this random person on the bus just stared at me. What are they gonna do? Oh, this random. And again, I find myself guilty of this stuff too. Hell, people who look at me, I'll even imagine like imaginary confrontations with them. I'll have imaginary confrontations with them in my head upon leaving the interaction in fear that I'm going to see them again and have that negative interaction. But at the end of the day, it's what that previous article that I didn't get to read alluded to was this. You cannot control how people perceive you. You could walk into a room and somebody could instantly have a problem with you because of the way you walk, talk, dress, whatever. And you can't control that. And that person could be completely thinking that they're in the right for thinking that you're a piece of shit just based on how you walk. And you can't control that. You can't control the stares you get. You can't control the looks you get. You can't control the whispers about you. People are just going to do what they want to do. They're just going to do it. But if you minimize yourself to accommodate that, you're assuming a burden that's not yours to assume. People are going to talk. As I'm sure many caregivers and parents have told many people, let them talk. They talked about Jesus. They talked about Muhammad. They talked about Martin Luther King. They talked about Steve Jobs. They talked about Steve Wozniak. They talked about Caesar. They talked about Brutus. They talked about fucking, I don't know. They talked about fucking Barney the dinosaur. I don't know. It's like they talk about it. Everybody talks about everybody. Every time somebody rises up and is most authentically themselves, there's people that are going to talk about them because they don't live authentically themselves, and they live so unauthentically that they feel the need to try and reach up and snatch down other people down to their level. It's why I can't stand normies. I can't stand anybody who considers themselves normal. I can't stand anybody who believes in the idea of normal, because it's a very dystopian thought to think that these are people who anything that becomes normalized, they'll just do, right? I mean, how many TikTok trends, destructive TikTok trends, have we seen that people are just doing because it's normal? How many destructive social media and relationship trends are we seeing that people are just going along with because it's normal? People who are normal, people who believe in normal, your average, everyday, average Joe is a piece of shit. And you don't want to care about that person's opinion. I'm sorry, you just don't. You just don't. Care about yourself before you care about some random average Joe whose idea of normality is so stilted that they're scared of anything that breaks that mold. But back to the article. It is a form of, excuse me, what's it called again? Compassion fatigue. Yes. It is a form of emotional and physical exhaustion that is accompanied by some emotional pain, says Sussin. I'm not reading that name. It's like NWOGWUGWU. And I would rather take a flight to the Vatican holding an upside down cross than mess up an African name on YouTube in front of all the people that watch me. So, but yeah, it says Sussin, this last name, a psychiatric nurse practitioner with Dunn. These caregivers who continue to give themselves fully to this person that they're caring for in that moment find it very difficult to maintain a healthy balance of empathy and also being objective with their own personal responsibilities. What are the effects of compassion fatigue? Psychotherapist Stephanie Sarkis says the mental health consequences of compassion fatigue can be severe, including anxiety, depression, as well as thoughts of suicide. She says compassion fatigue may also cause someone to have nightmares about another person's trauma. See that? It's like you can be too empathetic. When people say they're empaths, I really feel them, but I also have to remind them to look out for numero uno. Because if you're too empathetic, then somebody else's bullshit can become so ingrained in your character that you're up here having nightmares about somebody else's bullshit. You're having nightmares about somebody else's bullshit. You're having nightmares about other people's impressions of you. Meanwhile, the people who make those impressions of you, meanwhile, the people who hoist that bullshit on you are sleeping just fine. They're dreaming of rainbows and puppy dog tails and candy bars. While you're sitting up here dreaming about the time that stranger looked at you funny, dreaming about the bullying you endured, dreaming about what this person said, what that person said, just whisper, 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 whisper. And at the end of the day, nobody cares. Because as soon as you do something that makes you famous, as soon as you do something that makes you happy, as soon as you do something important, then the voices, they tone down to a whisper. Not that they're any less loud, but it's because they matter so much less that they're just background noise. Sure, they're in the car with you, but you're barely paying attention to them because you're too busy driving. Back to the article. It's feeling like you are just experiencing the same day. You're just experiencing the same day over and over again, groundhogging, and there's nothing enriching your life, Sarkis says. You aren't having any kind of fun. You don't feel like you're getting any kind of break. The African name that I absolutely refuse to mess up in front of my audience adds, people who suffer from compassion fatigue are more prone to emotional outbursts as well as developing alcohol, drug, or food addictions. Sarkis says compassion fatigue can also damage the other relationships someone has in their life if they aren't aware of it. Before you saw people as basically good, she says, you may start treating people in your family differently because when you're in a helping profession, you see the range of what people can do to each other. I'm struggling with compassion fatigue. What should I do? The African name and Sarkis agree the most effective defenses against compassion fatigue are therapy and self-care. Sarkis said it's important to make self-care a regular part of your routine. And I'm not really going to go into self-care because it's different for everybody. I know a lot of people like to think self care is like, oh, you brush your teeth, you go to the gym and work out, make sure your skin's clear, and they're like, I've that's the normal definition of self care, right? And I've tried that, and it doesn't work because what gets at the inside of someone to make them love themselves is different for everybody. And I wish we wouldn't create these normalized these fucking standards for everybody. But yeah, but like what's it's like what gets at the root of these problems is what's different for everybody. But I will say that some of these tips did benefit my life. Some of these tips we saw. Because realizing first off that I had no control over what people think, and that it didn't matter. Because if I viewed myself as so important that their words didn't matter, boom. And I'm not saying to go be a narcissist and go start walking around like you're the bee's knees, top of the line, and make yourself unapproachable to people. There's a happy medium for everything. But what I am saying is that you need to hold yourself to some kind of importance. Hold who you are, who you want to be, and that personality that makes you you to some level of importance so that people can't just ridicule it away. And I think a lot of this comes from, again, the natural fear of being alone. I know that I used to chase people a lot. I used to chase people's approval a lot. After high school, that's what I did because I was lonely during the COVID isolation. And after I went to a program called Job Corps, that's what I did because, again, I was isolated and I was craving companionship. The companionship specifically that I had when I was in leadership positions and doing things on that campus. But after I got through the anger of it, after I got through the sadness of it, after I got through the being mad at God because he would dare curse me with this loneliness, when I've been such a faithful servant and tried to be everything everybody wants, a liberating thought kind of came to me. And that's that in this isolation, there was no fear of rejection. There was no fear of having to deal with people's stares or what people will do, what people will say. And it helped me to build a thicker skin because I started to realize what that insular dimension was that was just kind of like closed off from people's thoughts, from people's feelings. It didn't matter. Like when I'm in my own world, when I'm journaling or doing whatever, it doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter what they would say. It doesn't matter what they say to me behind my back. And even if I showed up in person, I still get to come back to my hidey hole of isolation and solitude. Once you learn how to be alone, you start to develop a thicker skin because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what they say about you. You can always go back to yourself, and that can be your refuge. And I've got some articles here kind of going over the benefits of regular solitude. Not saying that you should isolate yourself to an unhealthy extent, but as said in this Discover article, seeking solitude can provide emotional regulation and a sense of autonomy. Learn how you don't have to close yourself off from the world to get the benefits of being alone. Solid. And this article is by Avery Hurt, posted on January 25th, 2025 at 9 a.m. Solitude is, simply enough, the state or condition of being alone. Stens explains, oh no. It's NG, is it win? No, I think, yeah, it's 3V win, maybe? I don't know. I probably just messed that name up. It's fine. It's fine. I was going to get canceled sooner or later. A researcher at Durham University, UK, who studies solitude. Time alone might be voluntary or involuntary. It might be pleasant or unpleasant. It all depends on the context. So solitude is not necessarily bad, but is it beneficial? Wynne is the principal investigator of Solitude Lab, where she and her team work to unravel these kinds of mysteries. They found that solitude offers at least two important benefits. It can provide emotional regulation, helping tamp down high arousal emotions. It can also serve another, less immediate, and perhaps even more important function. It can foster a sense of autonomy by allowing individuals to engage with their environment in a manner and at a pace that suits them best. That means that when you're doing things, it's at your pace. It's your own flow. You're not worried about what Joe over here thinks. You're not worried about what Nancy over here thinks. You're not engaging with it based on what Bob told you yesterday. It's just what you want to do when you want to do it. And journaling again is also helpful for that too, because I like to write. I like to draw comics and I like to write stories. I will find myself often writing in preparation for other people to read it. But with a journal, you can't do that because the only person that's going to be reading your journal ideally is you. So even if if I'm explaining something and explaining it like somebody who's never read it, like somebody who's never read it is going to read it, I stop. I act like since I'm the one who has context on that situation, I don't have to explain it. Like if I'm explaining a situation, my thoughts on a situation, I just go straight into my thoughts. Now, sometimes I will explain it if I feel like it needs to be, if I just can't get it out of my head, the situation, I have to look at it through a certain lens written down in order to kind of piece it together. But that's from my reading, from my memory, from my consideration, not for anybody else's. If it's any other situation that's just overly long and complicated and all I want to get out is my thoughts on it, then that's what I do. It's engaging with that environment at my own pace. But back to the article, studying solitude. And that last part is essential to beneficial solitude. It must be a matter of choice. In a 2023 study, Wynn and colleagues looked at the benefits and harms of solitude and explored the ideal balance between solitude and socializing. They found that when people spent time alone because they wanted to, if they were choiceful in their solitude, as the researchers put it, they felt just as satisfied as they would have felt if they had not been alone. In these days of hyperconnectivity, it can be difficult to choose solitude, and it turns out that the difference between solitude and connection is little more complicated than once thought. Rethinking what it means to be alone. Morgan Ross, a researcher at Oregon State University who studies how people balance connection and disconnection in their daily lives, has challenged us to rethink solitude to take a closer look at what it means to be alone. We're really trying to push to have a definition of solitude that makes more sense in the current media environment, he explains. He calls this new concept social aloneness, solitude with the potential for communication. In a paper published this past December, Ross and colleagues describe something they call shades of solitude. In each of these varieties of solitude, you are not interacting with other people, either in person or virtually, he explains. However, the varying hues along the spectrum of solitude stretch from intense, alone in a cabin in the woods lacking even your phone, to being alone but having some kind of engagement with others, spending a solitary afternoon watching cooking videos or reading blog posts. You're still engaged with someone else's thoughts, whether they're written in a book or posted on a social media feed, says Ross. Knowing that you have a network of people available when you're ready to connect makes solitude more comfortable, he adds. It's a temporary kind of break from your social ties. You can talk to people before, you can talk to them after, but during that moment, you're just focused on the benefits of being alone. And again, this is something that I now live by. There are points where I will not answer my phone if I don't feel like being bothered during the period in which I'm alone, or I'll rush through calls or something else, like unless it's super important. And one of those moments is when I'm journaling. It's all me. It's all me. I don't really care about anybody else because I know that I can disconnect, pull away, and I still have my connections when I pull back because I'm not going into complete isolation. And solitude does not have to be lengthy to be beneficial. You don't need to spend a week in a cabin in the woods to enjoy the benefits of solitude, the article says. You can indulge in what are, in effect, mini cabins, a solitary walk in the park, a few minutes on the patio with a book and a cup of tea, all with your phone in your pocket if you choose, so that your friends and loved ones are in reach if you need them. There are benefits to these latter experiences of solitude, and you probably have more of them than you realize. That couple minutes in the shower, that couple minutes commuting to work, are experiences that a lot of people have that they might not be thinking of as solitude, but potentially get benefits from, Ross says. So essentially, what this article is saying is that being alone, but within contact of people, helps you to stop caring about what people think because it takes the weight off of it. You know that you're going to have your social connections. You know that you're going to have all the things that you had before if you decide to dip out, be to yourself for a minute, and then come back. If you decide to dip out and do what you need to do to take care of yourself and then come back, you're going to still have those things. That makes isolation easier. It also takes the weight off of what other people think, because those other people aren't the network that you have to go back to after you're finished with your solitude. So you start to appreciate the people in your life more too for being there. Just being there. Um so yeah, it and also what it does too is that it disconnects your dopamine, your pleasure centers from the approval of men. Once you are disconnected from the approval of man, a miserable pile of secrets, you will then be truly free, as you'll be able to navigate the world purely on your own instinct, your own morals, your own guidelines. And as far as not being able to find relationships and things like that, which is the worry of people who often take this path, know that you don't have to be a certain way to be in a relationship, right? There's someone out there for everyone. I'm sure you've heard it many times, and it bears repeating. There's someone out there for everyone. We live in a society where people are so caught up in the masks and the facades they put up that even in dating, you have to take the person out on a date. You got to pay. You got to do this. You got to look like this. You got to act like this. You have to sound like this. You have to talk like this. You have to say this to this one. You have to say that to that one. You have to have this connection. And if you don't work here, blah 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 blah. It's all noise. It's all noise. Because at the end of the day, when you find the right one for you, there's going to be no expectations. There's not going to be any like, take me here, do this for me, do that for me. That person is just going to be happy being in your presence. No matter what your quirks or whatever are, no matter what you think is a problem, that person will see that as a reason to love you. That person will see that as a reason to love you all the harder. If you're quiet, if you like your alone time, if you have a problem with people always in your space, that person will respect that and see that as a reason to love you harder. If you're one of those people that's loud, talkative, and likes to and has a bunch of anxiety and wants to throw yourself at people all the time, that person will reel you back. But that'll be a reason that they love you all the harder. If you're someone who gives of yourself, if you're someone who's reserved and held back because they've been burned, the right person for you will see those things and love you all the harder for it. There's no such thing as a relationship where you have to put on a facade and wear a mask and be just this Adonis, this just Greek god, this Plato, right? No, because I'm going to be honest, anybody who demands and expects of you to be this way, anybody, no matter what relationship you're in, family, friends, whatever, they don't really like you for real. They don't really like you like that. They don't value you for real. If any relationship starts off with take me on a date, buy me a car, or buy me this or buy me that, that person doesn't like you like that. Because 9 times out of 10, the person that they actually like, you know what the only thing they're demanding from them is? Their time. The person that they're actually chasing, they're only demanding their time. They're only demanding to be in the same room as them, to be on the phone with them. The only time they have these bullshit expectations is with other people that they don't like that. And if they're gonna be, it's like if I'm gonna be forced to engage with you, I'm gonna get something out of it. It's wrong, but people do it frequently. That's why dating sites are an atrocious way to start meeting people. They're atrocious. I'm sorry. There's very little benefits for it. Because you already are starting off the interaction with unrealistic expectations when it should just flow. Both of you should just be you, see if your personalities are compatible, and if they're not, oh well, there's 8 billion people and growing in the world. You will find somebody for you. So, even though isolation can be painful, it's a sharpener. And remember that true relationships in your life don't expect you to be a certain way, right? So if you have people that you're like really, really like desperate to know what, like you're desperate, their opinion, just their opinion of you just controls your everything, your core. When you're going out in the world and dealing, and you see people and they give you these funny looks and it bothers you to your core, remember that they might not like you, but you don't want people who don't like you based on an impression or a vague thought anyways. So I think on that note, that's all for today's show. If you liked this episode, or even if you didn't, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Then head on over to my other socials, which will be linked below. I also highly encourage you to check out the articles I've read and any articles that I didn't get to read if you want to make accounts on those sites. And just kind of check those out. They'll be linked below as well. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. for an all-new What's Going On with Dapper Don. You don't want to miss what I have in store. Peace.